During Christmas at my parents' house, my 8-year-old daughter Luna opened her gift box and went pale. The colour drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. She clutched my hand with trembling fingers and whispered, "Mummy, I'm scared." My heart stopped beating for what felt like forever. I looked inside the box, my stomach already twisting into knots. The gift seemed normal at first, just another Christmas toy wrapped in festive paper. But then I froze. Recognition hit me like a physical blow. My hands started shaking so violently I almost dropped the box. The room spun around me and I felt like I was falling through the floor. 5 minutes later, with my voice barely steady enough to speak, I called the police. If you'd asked me that morning what would be the worst part of Christmas, I would have said it was my mother's dried-out turkey that could double as a doorstop. Or maybe her passive-aggressive humming as she orchestrated the chaos like a conductor directing a symphony of dysfunction. I would have said it was the overwhelming noise of too many people in too small a space. Or perhaps the exhausting performance we all put on to pretend we actually enjoyed each other's company. I would have been completely, utterly wrong. The worst part of Christmas was watching my daughter Luna freeze in place with that gift box in her lap, like someone had hit pause on her entire existence while the floor opened beneath her and swallowed our world whole. But I'm getting way ahead of myself here. We were at my parents' house, the same house where I'd grown up and learned to navigate emotional landmines disguised as family traditions. Same creaky floorboards that announced every footstep. Same overwhelming smell of cinnamon-scented potpourri mixed with decades of emotional avoidance. The living room was absolutely bursting with people and presents. A chaotic explosion of holiday cheer that felt almost aggressive in its intensity. Kids were tearing through wrapping paper like tiny tornadoes. Adults were talking over each other in competing conversations, and laughter echoed through the rooms. Just a little too loud and a little too forced. You know the kind I'm talking about. It's been a cherished tradition in our family for as long as I can remember that every kid gets a gift from every adult. And sometimes the kids even surprise each other with carefully chosen presents. It's always a whole elaborate production that takes hours to unfold. Wrapping paper flying through the air like confetti, gift tags going missing in the chaos. Someone always losing track of who gave what to whom in the beautiful mess of it all. Luna had accumulated a small mountain of presents by her side, each one wrapped with care and love. She was genuinely happy, radiantly happy in a way that made my chest tight with gratitude because I hadn't seen that pure joy on her face in far too long. I was watching her from across the room, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, and for just a moment I allowed myself to breathe deeply and feel something like peace. She picked up a medium-sized box wrapped in shiny red foil that caught the Christmas lights like liquid fire. Her face lit up with anticipation as she smiled that beautiful smile that always reminded me why I became a mother in the first place. She peeled the tape back carefully and methodically like she always does, savoring every second of the unwrapping ritual. No rush, no tearing, just her small, careful hands opening the lid with the reverence of someone discovering treasure. And then she stopped. The expression on her face changed so fast and so completely that for a split second I thought I was imagining things. Her shoulders tensed like someone had yanked invisible strings. Her smile vanished as if it had never existed. Her whole body went completely still, frozen like a statue. I froze too, my coffee mug suspended halfway to my lips. Something deep in my gut knew. That primal mother's instinct that screams danger before your brain can even process what's wrong. You know that sickening drop in your stomach? The one that tells you you're about to learn something that will change everything forever? She looked up at me across the room. Her eyes were wide and scared, filled with a terror that made my blood turn to ice. She didn't say anything, didn't make a sound, just stood up slowly and carefully like she was afraid the box might explode if she moved too fast. Still holding the open box in both hands like it contained something radioactive, she walked toward me with measured steps, her face completely drained of color. The festive chaos continued around us, but it felt like we were moving through a different dimension where sound was muffled and time moved like thick honey. She reached for my hand with desperate fingers and whispered, "Mommy, I'm scared." Then so quietly I almost missed it. "Just look." "Please don't say anything." I glanced down with growing dread. The box was still open in her small arms, tilted slightly toward me, like an offering I didn't want to accept. I looked inside, squinting in the dim light. At first, confusion clouded my vision. It was a toy, completely harmless and ordinary, nothing obviously wrong or dangerous about it. But then I looked closer. Really looked, and my entire world shifted on its axis. Everything around me, the twinkling lights, the joyful noise, the rich smell of baked ham wafting from the kitchen, all of it just dropped away into nothing. It was like time itself paused. Or maybe I did, suspended in that terrible moment of recognition. I didn't say anything. I couldn't form words even if I tried. My throat felt like it was closing. I looked up and frantically scanned the room, searching faces for answers I didn't want to find. My dad was laughing heartily at something, holding a ridiculous paper crown above his head like he was about to be coronated. My mum was fussing obsessively with the table settings like they might spontaneously combust without her constant supervision. Rachel, my closest friend since college, was deep in animated conversation with my cousin, gesturing enthusiastically with a wine glass that caught the light. The kids were scattered on the floor comparing their new toys with the serious dedication of art critics. Everything looked perfectly normal, festive, happy. But it wasn't. Nothing was normal anymore. "Come on," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Let's get some air outside." Someone's voice floated from behind me, cheerful and oblivious. "Everything okay over there?" I turned and smiled with every ounce of strength I had left, like a woman whose soul wasn't trying to crawl out through her chest and flee. She's just not feeling great. "We'll be outside for a moment to get some fresh air." I took the box from Luna's trembling hands, feeling its weight like it contained lead instead of plastic. We walked to the car in complete silence, our footsteps crunching on the frost-covered driveway. Neither of us spoke because there were no words for what we both understood. Luna climbed into the back seat and curled up into a tight ball, holding her knees against her chest like armor. I slid into the front passenger seat and stared at the thing in my hands, this innocent-looking toy that had just destroyed everything. I felt the sharp sting behind my eyes before I realized I was crying. My fingers were ice cold, but my chest was burning hot with a rage I couldn't yet name. I was holding something so small it could fit in my palm, but it felt like it could crush me under its terrible weight. And I knew, absolutely and unshakably knew, that nothing about this day or this life would ever be the same again. 2 minutes later, with hands that shook so badly I could barely dial, I called the police. It was devastatingly quiet in the car, the kind of oppressive quiet that presses down on your shoulders like a physical weight. I could hear my own breath coming in short, sharp bursts, and Luna's too, shaky and shallow like she was trying not to hyperventilate. The warm lights from the house still glowed cheerfully through the windshield, mocking us with their false promise of holiday joy. Someone laughed loudly inside, probably at another joke or funny story. I didn't care who it was anymore. Everything was different now, fundamentally and irreversibly changed. And if I wanted to explain why, if I wanted to make sense of how something so seemingly small could shatter everything we thought we knew, I'd have to start a long time before tonight, back when I still believed that the people closest to you could never truly hurt you. Rachel and I met during our sophomore year at State University, both of us struggling through advanced accounting classes and bonding over terrible dorm coffee and shared dreams of financial independence. She was brilliant and funny with this infectious laugh that could fill a room and make everyone around her feel lighter. We spent countless nights studying together, talking about our futures, planning the successful lives we were going to build. I was going to be a CPA, maybe start my own firm someday. She wanted to work for a big corporation, climb the corporate ladder, prove that a girl from a small town could make it in the big leagues. After graduation, our paths diverged slightly, but never separated completely. I got my CPA license and eventually transitioned into real estate, building a portfolio that gave me the financial security I'd always craved. Rachel took a position at an accounting firm, but after she got married to Tom, she switched to part-time work to focus on raising their family. 3 kids came fast, Sophie, then the twins, and Rachel seemed to slip further away from the ambitious woman I'd known in college. But we stayed close, closer than sisters, really. Our families spent holidays together. Our kids grew up thinking of each other as extended family. When Luna was born, Rachel was one of the first people to hold her, tears streaming down her face as she whispered about how perfect and beautiful she was. When I needed someone to watch the kids, Rachel was always there. When she needed financial help, which happened more often as the years went by, I tried to be there for her too. That's how Marie came into our lives. Rachel recommended her when I mentioned needing a reliable babysitter for date nights and business trips. She's amazing with kids, Rachel had gushed. Sophie absolutely adores her, and she's so responsible and caring. Marie seemed perfect at first. Warm and nurturing, great with both Luna and Aiden. But looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way she lingered too long when I came home. How she asked too many personal questions about our family routines. The slightly desperate way she hugged Aiden goodbye. Like she was memorizing the feel of him. I should have trusted my instincts when something started feeling off. But I was busy with work, with life, with the endless juggling act of modern motherhood. And Rachel vouched for her completely. So I pushed down my growing unease and told myself I was being paranoid. By then, my life had already been transformed by love I never expected. I'd met David when Luna was just a baby, and he'd swept into our lives like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. He was different from anyone I'd ever dated. Steady and kind, with this quiet strength that made me feel safe in ways I hadn't even known I needed. When Aiden was born 2 years later, our little family felt complete and perfect and unbreakable. Luna and Aiden were inseparable from the very beginning. Despite the age difference, she appointed herself his protector and guide, teaching him everything from how to tie his shoes to the proper way to eat ice cream without getting it all over your face. They weren't just siblings, they were best friends, partners in crime, completely devoted to each other. David and I would watch them play together and feel this overwhelming gratitude for the beautiful life we'd built together. We were a unit, solid and loving and secure. We thought we were safe. Until 6 months ago, when our world collapsed without warning, Aiden disappeared during lunch break at school on a Tuesday that started like any other ordinary day. He told his teacher he needed to get something from his backpack in his locker. He left the cafeteria with that same sweet smile he'd given me when I kissed him goodbye that morning. He never came back. No one saw who he left with. No one saw where he went. No security footage caught anything useful. No witnesses came forward. No ransom note appeared. He just vanished into thin air like he'd never existed at all. The police were involved immediately, but their investigation hit dead end after dead end. They searched everywhere, interviewed everyone, followed every possible lead. All they found was his backpack, dumped carelessly behind a hedge 3 blocks from the school like discarded trash. No ransom demands came. No contact from kidnappers. No leads that went anywhere meaningful. We stopped sleeping entirely. David stopped talking to anyone except the police. Luna cried herself to sleep every night for weeks, calling out for her brother in her dreams. I stopped waiting desperately for updates and started the horrible process of preparing myself for eternal silence. The not knowing was the worst part. Was he hurt? Was he scared? Was he calling for us, wondering why we weren't coming to save him? Or was he already gone, already beyond our reach forever? The questions consumed me, ate me alive from the inside out, until I felt like a hollow shell of the person I used to be. I told myself we'd somehow get through Christmas, that we'd fake normalcy for Luna's sake. We'd smile when we needed to smile. We'd show up where we needed to show up. We'd survive somehow, one agonizing day at a time. Then Luna opened that box, and everything I thought I knew about surviving came crashing down around me. Now we were sitting in the car outside my parents' house, me holding the box like it contained live explosives. Luna watching me in the rearview mirror with eyes too old for her 8-year-old face. I looked at the toy again. This innocent-looking thing that had just destroyed what was left of my sanity. It still looked harmless to anyone else who might see it. It still looked like nothing more than a child's plaything. But there was a mark on it, a tiny detail. A specific imperfection that no one else would notice unless they already knew to look for it. A small scratch on the wing from when Aiden had accidentally dropped it down the stairs. A faded spot where he'd coloured on it with marker. Details that were burned into my memory because I'd seen this exact toy 1,000 times before. Luna's voice was barely a whisper, so quiet I almost missed it. He had it with him when he went to school that day. I saw him put it in his backpack. I didn't answer because there was nothing to say. My throat felt like it was full of broken glass. I picked up my phone with shaking hands and called the police, knowing that this phone call would change everything forever. The police arrived about 15 minutes after I called them, though it felt like hours had passed in that suffocating car. They pulled up in a marked cruiser, calm and professional, like they were just here to check on a routine noise complaint instead of investigating the destruction of everything I held dear. Luna and I were still sitting in the car, that cursed box balanced between us like a ticking bomb. My hands felt like blocks of ice, and I couldn't stop them from shaking. Luna had her knees tucked up to her chest, her face turned away from me toward the window, probably trying to pretend this wasn't really happening. After the officer stepped out of the cruiser, I met them halfway up the driveway. The box heavy in my arms like it was made of lead instead of cardboard and plastic. They asked me several questions in calm, professional voices. I answered like I was speaking underwater, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. When I handed over the toy, I kept hoping desperately that they would look at it and tell me I was wrong, that there was some innocent explanation, that maybe grief had finally driven me completely insane. But deep in my heart, I knew I wasn't wrong. They found the gift card tucked inside the wrapping, written in Sophie's careful 10-year-old handwriting, "From Sophie to Luna, Merry Christmas." They came into the house, and everyone watched them like someone had opened the front door and let an Arctic wind blow through our holiday warmth. The festive atmosphere deflated instantly, conversations dying mid-sentence, laughter choking off into uncomfortable silence. They asked to speak privately with Rachel and Sophie. Rachel didn't resist or argue, just stood up with that same too bright smile she'd been wearing all day and followed them into the den with Sophie trailing behind, looking confused and scared. It was all very calm and procedural, the way these things always are in real life instead of in movies. Sophie explained in her innocent voice that she'd found the toy somewhere in their house and thought it would make a nice gift for Luna. She'd wrapped it herself, proud of her generosity and creativity. Rachel backed up her daughter's story with that smile that was just a little too rigid, a little too practiced. They had toys scattered everywhere in their house, she explained. Kids leave things behind all the time. It could have come from anywhere, really. David arrived while they were still inside, conducting their quiet interviews. He stood next to me without saying a word, his presence solid and comforting even in the middle of this nightmare. We both watched the proceedings like we were seeing a replay of something we'd already lived through in our worst dreams. The police took the toy as evidence, said they'd follow up with more questions. Then they left as calmly as they'd arrived. The Christmas party didn't recover from their visit. People started making excuses to leave early, gathering their things with uncomfortable murmurs about what a shame it all was. An hour passed, maybe more. Time felt meaningless now. I sat at the kitchen table with my hands folded in my lap, staring at nothing. David leaned against the counter, his arms crossed, his face carved from stone. Neither of us had moved or spoken since the police left. That was his toy, I said finally, my voice barely audible. He had it with him when he left for school that day. The marker line on the wing, the scratch from when he dropped it, that was definitely his. David didn't respond immediately, but I could see his jaw working, his hands clenched into fists. We both knew exactly what it meant, what it implied about Rachel's involvement. But the worst part was that it also meant something else. Something that hit me like lightning and fire at the same time. It meant that maybe, just maybe, Aiden was still alive somewhere out there. After what felt like an eternity, we finally stood up and moved like sleepwalkers through the house. We walked down the hall where the lights seemed dimmer now, more ominous than festive. The conversations we passed were hushed and awkward, people trying to pretend everything was still normal. We passed the Christmas tree with its twinkling lights, the discarded wrapping paper scattered like evidence of happier times, all the pieces of what should have been a perfect family day that no longer meant anything at all. Rachel was sitting alone in the sunroom, scrolling through her phone with studied concentration like she was trying to convince herself that everything was still fine and normal. The late afternoon light streaming through the windows made her look pale and fragile. When we stepped into the room, she looked up with that flickering smile that didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. "Hey," she said, her voice artificially bright. "Everything all settled down now? Kids and their imaginations, right?" David didn't speak, just stood behind me like a wall of controlled fury. I could feel the anger radiating from him in waves. I was the one who found my voice first. "We need to talk, Rachel. Right now." Her face twitched almost imperceptibly, but she kept that smile plastered in place. "About what, that toy? The one Sophie gave Luna?" She set her phone down carefully on the side table. "I already told the police everything I know. Sophie found it somewhere in the house and wanted to give a gift. Kids do that kind of thing all the time. It probably came from some play date years ago." David stepped forward, his voice cutting through her excuses like a blade. Aiden had that exact toy with him when he disappeared from school. She blinked rapidly, like she was trying to process what he'd said. You can't possibly be sure of that. Kids have so many toys, they all look the same. We are sure, I said, my voice getting stronger. Luna remembers seeing him put it in his backpack that morning. I remember it too. David remembers it. Aiden never went to your house, Rachel. He was never at your place, not once. So how did his toy end up there? She laughed, but it sounded like paper tearing. I honestly don't know. Maybe someone brought it over during a party. Maybe he visited once and you forgot. People forget things all the time when they're stressed. David's voice cut through her desperate explanations. We didn't forget. He never set foot in your house. Not ever. Her smile finally started to crack around the edges. Why are you doing this to me? She asked. And for the first time, she sounded genuinely hurt. I'm your friend. We've been friends for 15 years. I took a step closer. Close enough to see the fear starting to creep into her eyes. Because the police are going to come back, Rachel. They're going to ask harder questions. They're going to trace exactly where that toy came from and how it ended up in your house. And when they figure out what you did, you won't get the chance to explain it to us first. You won't get the chance to tell us why. Her face went completely pale, all the blood draining away until she looked like a ghost. She looked at David, then at me, then away toward the window like she was looking for an escape route. Please don't tell them anything more, she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. Please. Then tell us first, I said, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Right now. Tell us everything. She hesitated for what felt like an eternity, biting her lips so hard I thought she might draw blood. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back stubbornly, refusing to let them fall. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she said finally. It was Marie, your old babysitter. She called me a few months ago, completely out of the blue. My chest felt like it was caving in on itself. She was crying on the phone, Rachel continued, her voice getting smaller. She said she missed Aiden so much it was killing her. She said she'd made a terrible mistake leaving your family, that she'd regretted it every single day since. She just wanted to see him one more time, to talk to him, to tell him how sorry she was. David's fists clenched at his sides, but he remained silent, letting her continue. She offered me money, Rachel whispered, the words coming out like a confession. I didn't ask for it, I swear. She just offered, and I needed it so badly. You'd already told me you couldn't help me anymore financially. Tom had been laid off. The bills were piling up, and I was drowning. I thought it would just be one quick meeting, one conversation. What could it hurt? My throat felt like it was closing up. You arranged for her to take him from school? She said it would only be for an hour, Rachel said desperately. She promised she'd bring him right back. She just wanted to apologize, to explain why she'd left so suddenly. I told her when he had lunch break, when he'd be most likely to leave the cafeteria. She promised me, Emily. She swore she'd bring him back safely. Owen turned his head away, his whole body rigid with barely controlled rage. But he didn't come back, Rachel continued, her voice breaking completely now. She disappeared with him. I called her phone over and over, but it was disconnected. I panicked completely. I didn't know what to do. I kept thinking she'd bring him back the next day, that it was just some misunderstanding. Then another day passed, and another. I kept telling myself she'd show up with some explanation, that everything would be okay. Tears were streaming down her face now. I have 3 kids of my own, she sobbed. I never meant for it to go this far. I never thought she'd actually take him and run. I thought I was helping someone who was genuinely sorry and heartbroken. I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. You let us believe he was dead for 6 months, I said, my voice hollow with disbelief. David finally spoke, his voice rough with emotion. We buried him in our minds every single night. We grieved for him like he was gone forever. Rachel sobbed harder. I didn't know what else to do. I was terrified. I thought if I told you the truth, you'd hate me forever. I thought maybe she'd still bring him back. And then nobody would ever have to know. I didn't say it out loud, but I thought it with every fiber of my being. You could have told the truth. You should have told the truth from day one. Rachel was still crying when we walked out of that sunroom, but not the loud, dramatic kind of crying she used to fake to get out of trouble when we were younger. This was the silent, gutted kind of crying that comes from deep in your soul when you finally realize how badly you've destroyed everything that mattered. I didn't feel sorry for her, not even a little bit. The friend I'd loved and trusted for 15 years was gone. replaced by a stranger who'd sold my son for money and then let me suffer in agony for months. David didn't speak as we walked to the car. He opened the door and got in, staring out the windshield like he was trying to figure out how the world could still look exactly the same when everything had changed so completely. We drove straight to the police station through streets decorated with cheerful Christmas lights that now seemed to mock our pain. We told the officers everything, every horrible detail. The secret meeting Rachel had arranged, the money Marie had offered her, the 6 months of silence while she watched us slowly die inside, believing our son was gone forever. The officers didn't say much, just wrote everything down with professional detachment. One of them finally said, "Thank you for coming forward. We'll handle it from here," which I suppose is what you're supposed to say when two people just deposit their grief and rage on your desk like live grenades. Rachel was arrested the next day. Obstruction of justice, they told us over the phone. Maybe more charges later depending on what else we uncover. The specific legal details didn't matter to me anymore. I didn't answer when she called from jail. David didn't even look at the phone when it rang. Our house felt like a mausoleum, quiet and cold and empty. We didn't turn on music. We didn't finish cleaning up the Christmas decorations that now seemed like artifacts from a different lifetime. We just existed in this horrible limbo, waiting for the phone to ring again with news that actually mattered. Luna asked quietly if we should take down the Christmas tree. I told her not yet, maybe never. She didn't press the issue. I sat by the window for hours with coffee that grew cold in my hands, watching cars drive by and wondering how people could just continue with their normal lives when my world had ended. David stood in the hallway like a sentinel, like he was waiting for someone to walk through the door and bring our son back from the dead. That's when the phone rang 3 days later. Not the police this time. My mother. I shouldn't have answered, but some deeply ingrained sense of obligation made me pick up. "How could you do this to Rachel?" she snapped without any greeting, her voice sharp with accusation. "How could you call the police on someone who's been like family to us for years?" I blinked, momentarily speechless. "Excuse me, you've humiliated her completely. You've destroyed her life, ruined her children's lives. How could you be so cruel and vindictive?" For several seconds, I didn't have any words. Then I found my voice, and it was steadier than I expected. "She arranged for someone to take Aiden from school, Mom. She helped a kidnapper get access to my son. She didn't say a word about it for 6 months while we thought he was dead. She made one mistake," my mother said dismissively. "She was just trying to help someone who missed a child. People do foolish things when they're desperate for money. It's not like she meant for anything bad to happen." I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. I hung up the phone without another word. David walked into the room a moment later. He didn't ask what she'd said. The look on my face probably told him everything he needed to know. 3 days after that conversation, the phone rang again. This time, David answered. He listened for a moment, then held the phone out to me like it might explode in his hands. "Mrs. Patterson?" the voice said when I took the phone. "Yes, we found her. Marie, your former babysitter. She's been living under a false identity in a small town in Arkansas." My heart stopped beating entirely. "Is Aiden?" "He's alive. He's safe. We're bringing him home." My legs gave out completely. I collapsed onto the couch like gravity had suddenly remembered I existed and decided to reclaim me all at once. They arranged a video call so we could see Aiden before the transport arrangements were finalized. It wasn't ideal, but I didn't care if I had to talk to him through smoke signals or carrier pigeons. I would have taken a grainy photograph or a 3-second voice message. I just needed to see him, to know he was real, to confirm this wasn't some cruel dream. We were escorted into a sterile conference room at the police station. There was a laptop on the table and a technology specialist setting up the connection, like this was just another routine Tuesday appointment. David sat rigidly beside me, his whole body tense with barely controlled emotion. He hadn't said much since we'd gotten the call. I think part of him was afraid to believe it was real, afraid to hope too much in case it all got snatched away again. I wasn't sure I believed it either. Then the screen flickered to life, and there he was. My Aiden. He looked different, thinner and paler, with shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. His hair was longer and unkempt. He wasn't smiling, but it was unmistakably him. My beautiful boy who'd been ripped away from us. I forgot how to breathe, forgot how to think, forgot everything except the overwhelming relief of seeing his face again. "Hey, sweetheart," I managed to say, my voice cracking like glass. He stared at the screen with guarded eyes. Not angry exactly, but wary and uncertain. "She told me you didn't want me anymore," he said quietly, his small voice carrying across the digital divide like a knife to my heart. "She said you asked her to come get me because you were tired of taking care of me." Something inside me shattered completely. "That's not true, baby. That's not true at all. We never stopped looking for you, not for one single second." David leaned forward into the camera's view, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face. "You're our son. You'll always be our son. We love you more than anything in the world." Aiden looked down at his hands, rubbing his sleeve nervously, then looked back up at us. I didn't believe her at first, but then she kept saying it over and over every day. She said you were happy I was gone, that you had Luna and didn't need me anymore. I didn't know what to think. "You know now," I said, leaning closer to the screen. "You know the truth now." He nodded once, just barely. The connection froze for a second, and my heart stopped until his image came back. Someone in the background said we needed to wrap up the call soon. "We're coming to get you," David said firmly. "We're going to bring you home where you belong." Aiden didn't smile, but something in his face softened, and he didn't look quite so afraid anymore. "Okay," he said simply. "I'll be waiting." That night, I sat alone in the dark living room. Christmas lights still blinking behind me like tiny beacons of hope I'd forgotten how to see. I didn't cry until everyone else was asleep, and then the tears came like a dam bursting after months of drought. They were tears of relief and rage and overwhelming gratitude all mixed together. Aiden was coming home, and for the first time in 6 months, I actually believed it might be true. Aiden came home on a Thursday morning that felt like the first day of the rest of our lives. He stepped off the train with a state caseworker at his side and a small duffel bag that clearly didn't belong to him. When he saw us standing there, me and David and Luna lined up behind the yellow safety line like we were waiting for a miracle, he hesitated for just a moment like he wasn't sure we were real. Luna broke first. She ran straight toward him, her arms outstretched, and collided with him like a guided missile. He dropped the unfamiliar bag and hugged her back like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning for months. I walked up more slowly, afraid to move too fast and somehow break this perfect moment. David stayed frozen in place, his face carved from stone, probably afraid that if he moved at all, Aiden might disappear again. I knelt down in front of my son, this child who'd been stolen from us and somehow found his way back. "Hi, baby," I whispered. He nodded solemnly, then stepped forward and buried his face in my coat. I wrapped my arms around him and held on like I'd never let go again. That was the moment I knew we'd actually gotten him back, that this wasn't just another cruel dream. The next few weeks weren't easy, and I'd be lying if I said everything went back to normal right away. Aiden barely spoke for days, jumping at sudden noises and flinching whenever doors opened too fast. He slept with every light in his room turned on, afraid of the dark in ways he'd never been before. Luna stuck to him like superglue, following him everywhere like she thought he might vanish again if she let him out of her sight. Maybe she was right to worry. We got him into therapy immediately. No pressure and no expectations, just gentle presence and patience. He needed to know we were there, that we weren't going anywhere, that he was safe now. Progress came in tiny increments. One night, about 2 weeks after he came home, I found him and Luna on the floor of his room, colouring together in comfortable silence. He looked up at me with something like his old smile and asked, "Can we order pizza tomorrow?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. That was the first complete sentence we'd heard from him in days, and it felt like winning the lottery. Rachel was eventually charged with reckless endangerment of a child, obstruction of justice, and accessory to kidnapping. She took a plea deal, 18 months in county jail, 3 years of probation, and a permanent restriction from working with children in any capacity. She cried in court and claimed she never meant for any of this to happen, that she was just trying to help someone who seemed genuinely remorseful. The judge wasn't impressed with her excuses. Neither were we. She wrote us a letter from jail. I threw it away without reading it. David would have burned it if I'd given him the chance. Marie was arrested in Arkansas and extradited back to face federal kidnapping charges. She eventually pled guilty to custodial interference and child endangerment. The fraud charges were dropped in exchange for a psychiatric evaluation and a lifetime restraining order keeping her away from our family. She was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. In court, she said through tears, I wasn't trying to hurt him. I just loved him so much and missed him every day. I thought I could give him a better life. Nobody applauded her twisted logic. My parents never really understood why I'd turned on Rachel, as they put it. They thought I was being vindictive and cruel, punishing her too harshly for what they saw as a simple mistake in judgment. When my mother called Rachel's arrest a betrayal of friendship, I told her she was right, it was definitely a betrayal. Then I blocked their numbers and never looked back. Some bridges are meant to be burned. A year later, Aidan laughed. I mean, really, truly laughed. The kind of full-belly, head-thrown-back laughter that I'd thought we might never hear again. Luna had done something ridiculous with ketchup and a French fry, and he just lost it completely, laughing until he snorted. David and I looked at each other across the dinner table and didn't say a word. We didn't need to. We both understood that we'd just witnessed a miracle. Aidan goes to school now without fear. He draws elaborate comic books about superheroes who always save the day. He sleeps through the night with just a small nightlight. Sometimes he calls me Mom without even thinking about it. And I never correct him because he's always been mine in every way that matters. Today he and Luna are out in the backyard, and she's bossing him around just like she used to, telling him exactly how to build the perfect snow fort. He's letting her direct the operation with the patient indulgence of an older brother, who's learned not to take a single moment with his sister for granted. David is sitting beside me on the couch reading something on his tablet, but I can feel him watching them through the window too, still hardly believing they're both really here and safe. Everything isn't perfect, and I don't expect it ever will be again. We lost something during those 6 months that we can never fully recover. The innocence, the assumption of safety, the belief that the people closest to you would never deliberately cause you harm. But not all things that break stay broken forever. Some things can be rebuilt, sometimes even stronger than they were before. We're home now, all of us together where we belong. Did I go too far in my pursuit of justice? Not far enough? I honestly don't know, and I've stopped caring about the answer. All I know for certain is that when someone puts your child in danger, when they betray your trust in the most fundamental way possible, there is no such thing as going too far to protect your family. There is no limit to what a mother will do to bring her children home safely, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat.